why is baseball so different to where we can connect to it in this way that feels unsafe in any other way?
As you were talking, this comparison came up for me, the difference between romance and lust. And I see a lot of sports only in that lust category because there's not the time to develop a romance. A romance seems more simmering, the slower burn, and baseball, of course, has that. W.P. Kinsella pointed out the irregularities of the game in the baseball field and the dimensions, how the foul lines stretch off into infinity, and it's this cosmic connection and allows for all of these possibilities that other sports don't have with their constraints. Like, a lot of my memories in baseball are mixed because I was in Little League and didn't do well, and it just led to a lot of conflict with my dad and me. I would take his impatience, his criticisms, and turn them back on myself. And so that became my message, my narrative. And it's like right now, I can feel emotion coming up, and I know, like, yeah, that's real.
That's got to be very hard to feel like you don't have your dad's acceptance.
The reality is, of course, I want acceptance. I want my dad to see me for who I am. I want him to understand me. I want him to try to connect with me, and that's never going to happen. So as I went to therapy and just more connecting with myself, I recognized that, yeah, I do really like sports, really love sports, and baseball has been central to me. And then I started this podcast, and it's deeply emotional for me. And, Field of Dreams really hits on something for a lot of people. And I want to just cut through all these layers, all these defenses, all these walls, so people can be more alive. And then the emotion starts to come up, and that's kind of the truth barometer.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch? I'd like that.
Yeah, I'm just watching the end of this movie, and Dad want to have a catch. And for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of viewers, it cuts right through it. It tells you this is what's meaningful to you.
The dad, you want to have a catch. Like I literally, I can't think about that part without getting teared up. Mm-hmm. So my dad has passed now for 5-6 years. And I did the opportunity to be able to not necessarily have a catch, but what a catch would represent, which is just pure connection, is to be able to have that back for 15 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. The Patina Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast. Yeah, the reason why I wouldn't run as much if I liked it is because it's very time consuming. The training is very, very time consuming. And even though I do it in terms of the days per week, as little as I can get away with, which is 3 days a week, and two runs at around 5 miles, and then one long run, which is going to be somewhere 15 plus. And the time consumption of it is like when you have to do the long run, or for me in my schedule, it's always on like a Saturday or something. And with 4 kids, like that takes a lot. And emotionally, when you're deep into it, you're 12 miles deep, you're just like, man, I should be with my kids right now. I should be with my family right now. And you're just feeling guilt over it. You're feeling selfish. You're feeling a lot of negative things about it. So, but on the other end of it, the reason why you do it isn't because I'm a masochist. It's because I genuinely, because I didn't start the running journey until like 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. And when I started it, it changed my perception of resilience. It jumped it significantly from being somebody who was sober at the time, 15, 16 years and had been working on himself and trying to build up a level of resilience and capacity to do things that he didn't want to do, that sort of thing. When I took on running, it changed all of it significantly. And so doing something that I disdain on a regular basis and doing it anyway, that just completely evolved me in my capacity to do things I didn't want to do from the small little details in life. So anyway, if the long and the short of answer to your question is like, if I enjoyed it, then I would do it less, is because of the time consumption of it and the guilt that I feel, in the process of it. Yeah.
So find anything that you don't like to do it, and it'll build your resilience for other things.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And then that plays well too with my kids, because I want them to have this mentality at some point when they become teenagers and they start seeing me not as cool or a hero anymore. I would still want those seeds sown,
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Patina Podcast. I'm here with my guest, Ben Orlando, and I'm very excited. I've been waiting weeks, I think months. We've scheduled this one way out in advance, and I'm very excited to have you on. So Ben is an author, psychotherapist in training, the host of one of my favorite podcasts right now, especially one of my favorite podcasts that I like to listen to with my family, host of Midnight Library of Baseball, which is fantastic show. I mean, not going to spend the whole time just like groveling over how much I love the show, but the evolution from the first few episodes into season 2 is so significant. The jump, like you as a host, the jump and the quality of the show, the jump, the audio quality, everything, the music integrated, the presentation, like at the very beginning of the episode from the intro and then the outro, like teasing the next show, everything is so quality. It's so good. And yeah, right now we're on season 2, episode 9, I believe. And so, yeah, we're loving it. It's high quality stuff. So you being a psychotherapist or have you finished the training yet? You still getting the hours? Where are you at with that?
I'm less than 100 away from being a licensed professional counselor. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I know right before this recording right now, you're in a session, and I know you probably got some sessions later on today. So that's amazing. Yeah. So I hope to even, get some of the questions I have with you will kind of integrate some of your mental health knowledge and maybe help you placate on some of the things within your own show from a mental health perspective too. So I'm excited to get that view of things.
And you're a therapist as well.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Specialty in addiction and trauma.
Okay.
Specifically. So that's where the training lies. But yeah, the psychoanalysis side of things, I'm very intrigued by, especially like dream stuff. I'm always like very intrigued by. I used to, I think early on in my not knowing of things, would kind of roll my eyes at dream type stuff and Jungian type stuff, even though somebody coming from the 12-step world and addiction world, you become aware of Carl Jung because he had a heavy role to play in very early 12-step stuff. So you become aware of Carl Jung and the fascination with him with spirituality and stuff. But the dream stuff, I'd always kind of roll my eyes at. And then the more you start listening to someone, I would listen to some podcasts and listen to some Jungian psychotherapists do like dream analysis stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. This stuff is great. Like this stuff is amazing. So anyway, that's very cool. So yeah, dude, thank you for coming on. I'm very excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
So, Ben, generally the way I like to start is, and you'll understand why, I like to start with the guests that I have on, go back to childhood so that we can understand why you've got to where you are today or why we're talking to you today. And so if you don't mind, do you mind kind of going back to childhood, upbringing, and just kind of give us some of the highlights and maybe some of the things that you feel like that highlight that helped you become the person you are today?
Sure. And I may pause to put things together as we're going here. And this is something that you didn't get to yet. This is in the final episode of season 2. But just in my childhood, so my mom and dad are still together. So my mom was a librarian and my dad was a bricklayer at the Bethlehem Steel. So I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And then I had a sister, or have a sister, who is a year and a half older than me. I had everything I needed as a child, physically, Maslow's pyramid, safety, food, shelter. And for me, it was hard to fit in. And, something that I think is hard for people to reckon with is there are a lot of things going on that you don't, as a child, even know there are things that you want or need at the time. But how would you? Mm-hmm. And so that's going on internally, unconsciously. So I was fairly shy. I had friends. I played sports, did well academically, and I was on a tennis team, did well on the tennis team. Was going to do that in college, but it didn't work out. But in terms of there was bullying, so I was bullied, and I just had a recent conversation with my mom. She's like, I didn't know any of that. And it's like, yeah, I don't, I know and I don't know why I didn't tell you. And, my mom was very loving and supportive, and my dad was supportive in his way, but he didn't know how to be there emotionally. And a lot of my memories in baseball are mixed because I was in Little League and didn't do well. I was a really good outfielder, and I had glasses at the time. I had glasses from the time, it feels like as far back as I can remember, thick goggle glasses, and kind of hard to play sports in that way. But I was a great center fielder in Little League, could make long throws home. I remember I threw somebody out at home, and in Little League, you don't do that. But when I got to the plate, I just struck out almost every time. So it was painful. And it just led to a lot of conflict with my dad and me and his way of emoting. And these were things that were happening. He had no idea in terms of giving feedback, in terms of patience. And I didn't know either. And so I internalized a lot of that. And it took me a long time, in therapy as well, to really allow myself. It's that aspect was just a small part of my life. My dad coaching me or teaching me something, especially with sports. But it did have a big impact. And, it's not blaming, it's just this is what happened. I would take his impatience, his criticisms, and turn them back on myself. And so that became my message, my narrative. And yeah, and it's like right now, I can feel emotion coming up, and I know, like, yeah, that's real. So it kind of overcomes the self-doubt. Like, did this happen or not? Yeah, it happened, and I feel it. Like, it's sad. So I carried that, and I think it caused me to be very inward facing for a long time in my life. And to me, it's a big loss. I lost a lot of that time in high school. I lost that time in college to really connect with people, to explore from a place of self-confidence and support. Like, what would that have been like to live those years and really, really look to see what was going on? Because I went to school, I loved architecture, I had drafting classes in high school, but I was told, I don't think with my parents necessarily, but other people, it's like, oh, there's not a lot of money in that right now. So I went into engineering at Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. I hated it. Was just failing classes, avoided it. And I finally changed to architecture and really loved that. Then I ended up going to the Peace Corps in 2001, El Salvador. And I spent 4 years in El Salvador and started teaching. And just as I was down there with one of my friends who was also in Peace Corps, let's write a novel. And so we had planned to write this novel together. And I don't know what happened exactly, but he ended up not doing it. So I moved forward, and then I started writing, and I wrote this novel, and I kept writing. And so when I came back, I eventually went to graduate school for writing and became a college professor. I wrote fiction, short stories, novels, like tons of them. But I still had that inside of me, this avoidance, this not asking for help, not asking people, not reaching out, not having confidence in myself. And yeah, there's a lot of loss, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. Like, once you recognize where you are and what happened, there's both the grief of all of that loss, of all those opportunities, but also, what are you going to do now? So I can be that person now. And yeah, I was married. I didn't really know how to be in a marriage, and I didn't know how to express myself. I was angry about a lot of things, and I just closed up. And so ended up getting a divorce, moved to Washington, D.C., met my wife, who is a therapist. And, we met on OkCupid and started dating, and we've been married for 10 years. We've known each other for 12, 13 years now, and it's amazing. And I would not be a therapist if not for her. And I just have so much gratitude for her and what she's helped me recognize. And it's not like she ever pushed me into becoming a therapist. I was I was a assistant professor of writing, and just years of listening to her talk about her clients and us working on our relationship. Eventually, it wasn't right away. It was after years I started going to therapy. And as you know, and I'm sure other people it's hard, because you're probably not going to find your therapist the first time. It's hard enough to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, and then you end up not jiving, not connecting with the therapist. And so I think I saw 3 or 4. And again, it was over the course of years to find somebody I really connected with. And it was so helpful and restorative to me that I eventually thought, I want to do this. I want to help people in the way that I've been helped. And so I continued writing and ended up writing this book about a female knuckleball pitcher, and found an agent. And in the course of that process, we were looking at ways that I could build my audience. And she said, well, just find something that you're passionate about. And I've done podcasts before, like intense, in-depth hosts, like bring people on, like the whole editing thing. I've done that before. So I decided to do it again, and I returned to my love of baseball, because when I went to Peace Corps, I abandoned all sports. Like, I went there and I lost connection with all sports, and I thought, yeah, this is really who I am. I don't need sports. It was just something I was following. They take up time, but it's not true. So as I went to therapy and it's more connecting with myself, I recognized that, yeah, I do really like sports, really love sports, and baseball has been central to me. You know, my dad would take me to baseball card shows. We went to Fenway Park, and he did those things, and I love him and appreciate him for doing some of those things. He didn't like to go to baseball card shows, and he took me. He did a lot of things that I know he wouldn't have done. That was his way to show love, and we connected in that way. And in the last 6-7 years, I just started reading every baseball novel that I could find, and then I wrote this novel, and then I started this podcast. And so, over the course of the podcast, I found my reason for doing it, and it's deeply emotional for me. And Field of Dreams really hits on something for a lot of people, a lot of men, but a lot of women too. And I want to just cut through all these layers, all these defenses, all these walls, so people can be more alive. Like, I feel like when you're more emotional, when you're not having these defenses and anxieties, you're actually living a more natural life. And so that's my intention in doing this. I like the Malcolm Gladwell Freakonomics kind of unoverlooked aspects too. I really like to do that. I like the intellectual curiosity, but I also like the emotional depth and bring all those things together. So that's what I try to do with my podcast. I also like the audio and the high production quality, and so
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, a lot of stuff comes up for me as you're talking, Ben. Let's see. So I don't want to go too much into the show yet, but there's a recent clip that came out with Gene Hackman. All these things happen whenever a death of a star happens, right? And there's this clip from the Screen Actors Guild of Gene Hackman, and he's asked about his father, and the host says, this seems to be a common thread for a lot of artists, the loss of a parent. Tell us about your dad. And Gene Hackman can't get through it without crying. And he said he must have been in his late 60s, 70s or something, probably in the 70s. But he says, he's explaining the moment that his dad left his family, and he's 12 and he's outside playing with his friends, and his dad kind of gave a wave, just waved by, and he's like, waves by, and as he's saying it, he's connecting back with that 12-year-old, and he can hardly get through it. And then he kind of does the refrain of trying to say a joke to alleviate the tension. He says, it's only been 65 years, and the audience is really quick to give him that relief of tension by laughing at the joke, and because everybody's feeling it in that moment. But it made me think, fatherhood, parenthood is so profoundly needed. Attunement within parenthood is so profoundly needed, and when it's not given, it leaves a dark patch on us, right? Like, it's very hard for us to think about that and not. We go back to that version of ourselves, that 12-year-old version, that 6-year-old version, that whatever version, and we can feel it deeply. And so Field of Dreams, we know, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we know within Field of Dreams, the story of the father-son relationship is important. And one of the episodes you brought up, which I never thought about, and I reached out to the author that you had on that explained it, the relationship between the father and daughter. I've never picked up on that before. And now being somebody who hopes to one day, God willing, if we could have a daughter, would be amazing. But I never viewed that relationship before in that way, the relationship between Ray and his daughter. And anyway, so there's some incredible, I guess, the connection of parenthood is huge. And so as you were explaining how your dad was with you and his desire for you to be like, as I'm connecting with your dad, I'm connecting with me as a father, and me currently being the coach to my sons, and there's times where I feel like, oof, dude, you're being too hard. You're being too much right now.
Yeah.
And it's not that, because there's this classic example of living your dreams through your kids, and that's not it for me.
Yeah.
It's me wanting my kids to have fun and have this be an important thing for them, be an important opportunity for development or whatever, but have fun. And I know in my experience, I reflect back to my experience, I wasn't having fun unless I was having some level of success. So like, you don't have to be awesome, but having some level of success. And so that's where, for me, working with my kids, having them, like, trying to hold a standard to them, for them, without going beyond like effort, like trying to keep the standard at effort instead of beyond that, of being excellent or really good or being successful every time. And there's times where I creep onto the other edge of that, and I feel it. I'm like, crap. And then so when you're talking about your relationship with your dad and how baseball, held some conflict and some tension there between the two of you, I'm like, oh gosh, man. Like, cause I think I'm your dad in some ways in that I'm going beyond maybe what's good or healthy in my desire for them to succeed. So for you, how is that reflected for you, I guess, now in your relationship with your dad, as you've tried to explain that to him, or with your parents? How has that been, where it's like, you went too hard, Dad, and it destroyed my self-confidence in later areas? Or did you even communicate it that way?
Yeah, we've had conversations, and I think it's hard because, like, as you're talking, it's not necessarily about making mistakes. And like, if that was, every mistake you made that was done, like, man, that would be hard to move forward, right? It's not the mistakes, it's recognizing some of those, or being receptive to that possibility and repairing, right? Like, oh, I went too hard here, or, I lost my temper here, and like, yeah, I'm sorry I did that. I really love you. I don't want to be doing that. Like, the repair is so important. And so it's hard because my dad is very resistant. Well, we can have conversations, but nothing's likely to change. So I've stopped sharing as much. My mom is open. She been able to hear things, and so again, you haven't listened to, but in the final episode of season 2, I talk about my relationship with my dad, and he agreed to sit down and talk, and we talked about baseball. And so part of that recording is in the episode, and it was hard for me to decide to do that, and like, putting something out there like that, like, yeah, nerve-wracking. And I recently did get a negative piece of feedback from somebody. Like, how could you do that? The vast majority of people have been very supportive and connecting with that. But my mom, she heard it, and that was one of my fears. But she was very supportive. There was nothing critical coming back from her, and we had a really emotional, deep conversation after that. So it's hard. it's hard enough. It's like these steps to take to recognize in yourself the truth and be honest with yourself, and then to express that with somebody else, hoping that it's going to lead to a change, but knowing that it might not. That's where I am right now in terms of my relationship with my father.
And your dad didn't listen to the episode?
No. That's one of the things that I talk about in the episode, because he doesn't really follow anything that I do, doesn't talk about that or ask questions about it. So, of course, I told him and asked him when we did the recording, like, this is for the podcast. Like, are you okay with that? And he said, yeah. But beyond that, yeah, I don't imagine he'll ever listen to it or any of them.
Yeah, so you probably explained this part then in the episode, that's got to be very hard to feel like you're not having your dad's, still, and maybe even some of that embodies the acceptance you felt like you didn't receive on the baseball field, but to feel like you don't have your dad's acceptance of wanting to listen at least to an episode here and there, and maybe even just that one episode, having some sense of approval or some sense of acceptance.
Yeah, it is hard. And, that's the reality. And for me, I've always compared and minimized my experience. People have had it much harder. I had this kind of childhood, and other people, had this kind of relationship and abuse and all this, and so I minimize. But the reality is, of course, I want acceptance. I want my dad to see me for who I am. I want him to understand me. I want him to try to connect with me, and that's never going to happen. So, yeah, it comes right back up, right up in my stomach, right up my chest, right up into my eyes when I make that connection, because that's me being honest with myself. I love him. I will always love him, and this is the relationship that we'll have until he dies. Right? That's the honest truth, and that's painful.
Does you accepting that truth alleviate any pain in your best estimation, or?
Yeah,
like,
I want to be in reality. Yeah, the biggest problems and why people come to therapy is because of denial and avoidance, right? That's everything. That's why people come to therapy. It's not because they're too openly dealing with emotions, right? It's because of some form of denial or avoidance. And so I want to be honest with myself, and that's going to help me, because it's going to help me not turn things back on me. It's going to help get that voice out of my head that says you have to do this and you have to do it fast to get acceptance and approval. So working on creative projects, really until recently, like, there's been that voice, and it's led to a lot of anxiety. Like, you got to get it done so you can get that acceptance and approval. And the more honest I've been with myself, the more freeing it's been to really do this creative work from a place of excitement, from a place of joy, and not turning things back. So being honest with myself has helped. It hasn't decreased the pain in ways opened up to letting more of that pain through, but it's led to deeper connections with myself and others.
Okay. Hold up. Wait a minute. It's an interesting interview, no? Take a moment to click subscribe, follow, like, all those things. Please leave a comment in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this episode. Tell me what I could be doing better. I appreciate all the feedback. That's all I'm going to bother you with. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah, it makes me think, and as I had mentioned, I specialize in trauma, and the route in which I work with trauma is something called brain spotting, which is the less popular form of EMDR. And so working with
one of the clients that stands out for me as you're talking is this client came in, alcoholism. And for most clients, there's like an obvious trauma that they can point to that, is a precursor kind of thing. And this client's like, I couldn't tell you. Like, great childhood, parents took care of me, all my needs were met, everything's great. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just kind of see what comes up, see if something comes up, and we go through the protocol to get him ready and primed for his connection. And then, so he gets there and he's, and I could tell he's hesitant with something. I'm like, you don't have to say it out loud, but just know what it is. And so he decides to share the information, and he says, it's so stupid. It's just so stupid. I'm like, it's okay if it's stupid. Just notice what it is. He's like, I was like 8. And then he starts his lips kind of starts quivering. He goes, and he couldn't get it out. And he would just start choking. And he couldn't get it out. And then finally, the moment he starts getting out, it all kind of comes out along with kind of this roaring cry, of essentially saying, my dad was late to a game. And so he was used to his dad being there, being on time, being his rock, he could trust all these things. And this memory of him being in the outfield, and the whole time of him being in the game, him looking around, where's dad? Dad's not here. Dad's not here to coach. Dad's not here. Like this whole time, all this anticipation and anxiety building up. And finally it's like mid-game and he sees his dad and he breaks down, like just like the betrayal he felt. Right. And as you talk about, Ben, the sense of a minimization toward your experience of what other people must have experienced, which is way harsh. And in practicality, sure. Practicality, there's way harsh things. But in your experience as a child, that was so harsh. And for this young man that I was working with, it was just like, you can't compare yourself to someone who's sex trafficked or something, you can't, because that's not a reality that your mind could even conceive of as a child at that time. Your reality can only conceive in what the experience was for you. And so in that experience, it was a complete betrayal of something that was solid for you. A solid foundation was you constantly, now you came to the reality that foundation is not something you can rely on. And so that had to be tormented. So I think as you're talking about the minimization thing, that's something that comes up for me, that as you're sharing that, happened to be around I wasn't thinking about sharing that as we were talking about that, but happened to be a son with his father around baseball again.
Yeah. And if that little boy had known what was going on, and he was honest with his father at the time, he could have worked through it, and it wouldn't have become its own little module and been pushed down inside. And then those just build up, right? Those moments, just one after the other over years, leading to how we operate. And one of the things that I find fascinating and also really sad and unfortunate is that our operating systems are based on, the mentality, the mind of a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, because that's when you're shaped, right? And a 4-year-old or 5-year-old does not know how to cope with the world. And yet that's when we form all of these defense mechanisms to deal with the world. And then we go on and use those for the rest of our lives until we become aware. And so, most of the people walking around are walking around with avoidance, pleasing, all these different defense mechanisms that they learned when they were a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's crazy.
Yeah. Even just that, as the listeners are listening to this, they probably reflected back to the version of themselves that were 4 or 5, and they're like, oh my, like that. Okay, I can see it. I can see the pleasure seeking, or the avoidance, or the whatever that was coming out, the people pleasing that was coming out at that age. Well, thank you for walking me through some of that, of your history, because like you said, I hadn't gotten to that final episode. I think how many episodes is it? 12 episodes in that first or that second season?
14.
14. Okay, so probably a little less than halfway there. And yeah, now I'm really looking forward to that episode. But I love all of the deep nuances that I like. Not even the DVD version of extra, the extras and all the little things wouldn't be able to pull up, that you're being able to pull out and just extrapolate from Field of Dreams, from this movie, is amazing. I think, from like a bird's eye view, you're like, it's just a movie. Like, why would somebody sit and listen to 14 episodes that extrapolate off of this one movie? Like, come on. And then when you're able to go into it, you're like, oh my gosh, like all the little nuances, everything from the paradoxical, spiritual, overwhelming spirituality within the movie being done by someone who is an atheist and like hated and disdained his dad for the sake that, because his dad came to know the Lord toward the end of his life, like the weird kind of nuances and all the little serendipity sort of, coincidences that took place within the making of the movie, and all the things that I can't remember his name, the coach that was hired on in Field of Dreams, and he Rod Dato happened to know and be best friends with the father of one of the guys that died as he was a baby, and died in war as he was a baby. And he could now tell his now adult son what his dad was like, like that there's so many parts within the show. Like, as I'm driving, good thing I got my sunglasses on, because like I got tears coming down.
Yeah.
And, there's so many things within the show that I just deeply, deeply connect with. And I'm able to go back and remember, for me, as we're talking about fatherhood and stuff, and I'm kind of choking back a little bit just as we're talking, is like, for me with my dad, I was so young, but I have a few memories that are very, very specific when I'm 3 and 4, and my parents are going through a divorce. And the one that connects to baseball is, I remember my dad taking me and my brother out to go and play catch. My brother's 4 years older than me. And I have very visual memories of this. And as I reflect back on it now as an adult, I'm like, well, he was trying to stop me from wailing and crying because I was missing my mom. And because she had left. And so he was trying to like just get us out of the house to, and so the connection to playing catch with my dad happened to do with, him trying to help us get through this very early trauma, this significant trauma, and my dad wasn't an athlete at all. In particular, he wasn't some high school star athlete. He wasn't any of these things, but he did like baseball up until the strike in, I think, 98 or something like that. But up until that strike, he was a fan of the Dodgers, even though I wasn't a Dodger fan. And so there was that connection with baseball with him. But I remember that, like, playing catch with him. And I remember even as we got older, him trying to play baseball with us, but getting frustrated at times. But yeah, so there was this obvious connection that Field of Dreams has with fatherhood. W.P. Kinsella didn't, that was a secondary thing for him.
Yeah.
For him, his connection with Terrence Mann, the author, being able to write again was something that was for him deeply moving and deeply connecting. And so for you, kind of having both ends of this experience, being the author and then also being the child of the father and having these connections with fatherhood and baseball. Which one do you connect with the most? Which one for you feels more obvious?
Oh, definitely the father son. It's like that. I mean, you pointed out that one example with Rod Dato and Brian Frankish and discovering,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, it was uncovering so many of these mind-blowing moments. And this was Phil Alden Robinson, the writer director, who told me this. And what are you talking about? W.B. Kinsella, like in Shoeless Joe in the novel, it ends with Terrence Mann, but J.D. Salinger, right? J.D. Salinger is the author in the book, and he's the one who walks into the cornfield, and that is what Kinsella finds to be most meaningful. And he didn't even consider the father-son relationship. I mean, to me, I can't help speculate, right? It's like you have a big big emotional block going on there, because you create the father-son relationship, and it is a big part of the book, but for you, it's not the central component. That's amazing. And like for him to say that, like just, yeah, I didn't even think of that. So for me, it's definitely the father-son. And, just a few moments ago where I was talking about my childhood, and like that defense comes up of doubting, like, did it actually happen this way? Was it that bad? Or are you misconstruing? And then the emotion starts to come up, and that's kind of the truth barometer. And at the end of this film, that happens again. It's like, yeah, I'm just watching the end of this movie, and Dad want to have a catch. And it feels so cliche at this point, but it's true. And for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of viewers, this happened. It cuts right through it. It tells you this is what's meaningful to you. And maybe some people have that reaction when James Earl Jones, when Terrence Mann walks into the cornfield, right? And that's what's powerful to them. I just was re-listening to this interview I did with Jerry Blevins, former Major League pitcher. And for him, like the really emotional part of that movie was when Doc Graham had to come off the field.
Yeah.
Right? To save Karen and lose his chance of being a ball player anymore. To him, that hit so deep. That was it for him. And so it's like, for different people, your emotional reaction is telling you what means the most for you. And to me, it's at the end. It's, it's that moment, because it hits on so many painful memories and painful current truths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that where it is for you too?
Like, I think so. Yeah. Doc giving up his dream for the little girl, to go and save this child, which ended up becoming the thing that he said was the most profound thing. He wouldn't give it up. And then he proved it. Like he walked it through, because he says earlier, like, if I would have, I forget the exact quote, but if I would have given up this, being able to be a doctor, then that would have been a travesty, or that would have been, and then for him then to walk that through, that reality through, like he walked it out. It wasn't just he was talking a game to sound nice. He walked it out. He literally walked through and gave up his dream to save this little girl. Yeah, that part hits me hard. And then, but yeah, the Dad, you want to have a catch? Like I literally, I can't think about that part without getting teared up. So my dad has passed now for 5-6 years, and I did the opportunity to be able to not necessarily have a catch, but what a catch would represent, which is just having attunement and time away from anything, just pure connection, is to be able to have that back for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
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 So yeah. So yeah, I wasn't necessarily, thanks for asking the question. I think you being able to honestly connect helped me feel safe enough to be able to connect where I'm at with that. So I appreciate that. Give me a moment. Let me
Thanks for saying that.
wipe my nose here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's like a key, right? It's like,
yeah.
to me, it's setting, and that's the storytelling beauty of not only W.B. Kinsella, but Phil Alden Robinson in rearranging the pieces to build that up, right? It's such a well done composition. It's like you're peeling back the layers from people, and they don't even know it's happening. Right? You peel it back, you peel it back, you peel it back, and then you're touching their heart, and it just hits on so many different things. Like Willie Steele, who was W.P. Kinsella's biographer, he said, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. And you're saying that right now. It's, I had so many positive experiences with my father, and now he's gone. And I'm hitting on, I won't be able to do that anymore. I won't be able to hit that 15 minutes or that hour. It's gone. And so it hits on both sides of it. But it's that buildup it's a bit of a trick, right? It's like people don't see it coming, and it's happening unconsciously the whole time while you're distracted by the other parts of the story.
Yeah. I think even now when you watch it though, all the cards are laid out, and it's still. I watched this, and I watched it in when you had reached back out and said you're willing to do this. I'm like, well, I want to watch this movie again. I probably hadn't watched it in 3 years or so. And so I watched it again, and all the cards are laid out. I know every scene. There's no surprises. And still the phrase, and then one of your guests had shared, that the reflection where Costner catches the ball, receives the ball from his dad, and just kind of takes a moment and looks back. You can see him kind of take a moment and absorb it before he tosses the ball back.
Yeah.
And and everything about those little subtleties, there's no surprise there, but I pick up on it. I'm like, gosh, you feel it so much. So yeah. And I think there's some honest reflection that conversations like this have, but the movie brings up where it's like the moment that one of my kids say, hey, Dad, let's go outside and play some catch. Like the self-accountability, I can't say no, unless I'm like, buddy, I got a session in 6 minutes. I'm sorry. I can't do it, something like that, but we'll do it later on. I make sure that we're able to do it later on. But now you say you just list yourself as a writer. And the way you just described yourself was just as a writer. And it feels more like the content that you got to be able to pull up for each episode has to be a ton of work, because someone will say something like, oh, there were a lot of people that were wanting to be in the show, but I can't remember who. And then you have to go through and do a ton of research to figure out all the actual names of people that went. And it strikes me as you're probably more of like, it feels like you're more of like an investigative journalist or something at this point for the show, because you have to find so much content within the show. So I want to honor that before I say this, because I do appreciate that. Like without that doesn't draw me into this next part, which is the thing I really, really like, is at the end of each episode is you have each person share their personal baseball story, or some person share their personal baseball story. I don't know if they're just like listeners or they're people that or something, but those always impact me the deepest. The personal stories, like I said, the author sharing the story about how she got into writing about baseball and stuff because of the relationship with her father, and after his passing, and just kind of trying to process that and heal from all that. I just wanted to mention that. I really love that little extra. Let's just take time for these people to share their personal stories. What got you to
do that? What got you to say, this is something I want to add on to the show?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, because I was contemplating whether to do it again for season 3, and I'm going to. And what did get me? I think it was really coming to terms with what I wanted the podcast to be, and seeing reactions on Instagram and hearing people comment, and then people starting to send me emails about their experiences. And they're so not only deep and emotionally moving, but just so interesting. You know, they're so different. And like, that's, to me, that's where everything comes together. It's emotionally impacting, it's interesting, it's authentic. And I was just getting so many of these responses. I thought, and it might have been when putting together episodes 2 of my guests that I had, because they had their own stories, to do that. And I have heard back from people saying that they really did enjoy the stories, like you said. And I love it too, because it's, you know, it's listeners for the most part, people who listen to the show, and then they get to tell their stories too, and have some participation in the show. So if it's a mix of guests, because invariably, as I'm talking to them about the podcast, often they, depending on the questions I ask, they talk about their experiences and their childhood and relationship to baseball. So it's a mix of those and listeners. And at this point, it's hard, because I'm trying to figure out a way how to continue to get those stories, record it. So I'm asking people to record their stories and send them to me. And because I just don't have the time right now to interview, because, you know, for season 2, I would sit down and talk and do a Zoom with each of those people, and then edit that piece as I did with the other pieces too. And yeah, like you said, the whole thing takes a lot of time. I would ideally like to work with a platform at some point, because, you know, there are shows like, you know, Freakonomics, This American Life, they have, I don't know, 12, 15, 20 people on the staff doing the research and doing the interviews and doing the writing and doing the editing and doing the sound and music. And I do that all. So it takes a lot of time, in addition to being a psychotherapist. So it takes a lot of planning and time, but that's where that comes from.
Yeah. That's something I really respect about the show too. It's built up this audience from nothing, not having a team, not having some big name that's starting a show. You know, you're not Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen starting a podcast where you're going to have 10 million viewers on day one, you know, this sort of thing. You're starting from nothing, and you're doing all the work yourself. You don't have a team of people behind you. So to build it up to a place to where you could have a platform or a team around you, that'd be a pretty amazing gift. So without dishonoring anyone's in particular story, which one jumps out at you? Like, if you were to be at a party and someone says, oh, what story really stuck with you that they shared, you know, that someone shared with you personally, and you don't have to say who that person is in particularly, but what baseball story did someone share with you that really stands out to you?
I don't know, let me think. The one that jumps out right away is a story shared by a listener, and it's in season 2. It's, you know, his relationship with his father wanting to play catch, and his father backing away, his father not wanting to do these things with him, and this incident that happened when his father had dropped him on his head when he was a baby. And, you know, in his mind, that really affecting the way that his father related to him. And there was so much grief in that, but just the components of that story and the emotional element really has stood out to me. And I've been corresponding with this man for a long time, and it's just been a rich friendship that has developed based on him reaching out to me and sharing, and then sharing his story, and being open to it, because putting yourself out there like that isn't always easy.
Yeah, I remember that one. It must have been, because I heard it yesterday. It must have been episode 7 or 8. Yeah, that one. Again, that's one of these things where you listen to the show or you watch the movie Field of Dreams. Like, for me, a clear sign of emotional development is when that voice that before maybe sounded more like a critic starts to feel like an accountability partner. And yeah, like that voice was coming up for me as I was hearing it. And the same thing as you're talking about your experience with your dad being a little bit too stern, or wanting you to be, causing conflict within your little league experience, is like that came up for me yesterday when I was hearing that story. I'm like, okay, well, are there areas where I'm limiting my attunement, not just my attunement, but my emotional connection, my ability to be emotionally there for my kids? And so I like give myself a little self-check. And then I do have a question that I ask my kids and my wife from time to time, how am I doing as a father, or how am I doing as a husband, which is a scary question, but because they always do answer honestly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I hear something like that, I'm like, okay, I better check in again, see how I'm doing, But yeah, so that's, I did hear that one. And yeah, it's very good.
Well, another thing that comes up, like linked to that particular story, is like, it's really fulfilling for me to be the intermediary sometimes for this particular man. He also in his personal story talked about Field of Dreams, and he was like spot on. And he had he was a journalist, a psychologist. So, he had this understanding, and he kind of broke apart the ending of the catch back and forth. And this is what's happening here. And he's pausing and he's giving him a chance. And he's like, I don't know if the director or the writer intended this to be this way, but this is what I took out of it, and it added a lot. And so I went back to the director, Phil Alden Robinson. I'm like, hey, this is what this man said. What do you think? And he's like, well, yeah, I thought of some of that, but I really appreciate his insights. And then I went back and told this guy, hey, here's what the director of Field of Dreams said about your interpretation. And so I was able to do that a handful of times to connect with the cast or the producers or directors, and go back to the listeners. And I did that for this guy who has played catch more than 1,000 days now.
I had him as a guest, and he'll be I'm actually starting to edit that episode right now. Yeah. I always mess up his name.
Awesome.
John. Yeah.
He told me a story about meeting Dwyer Brown, and how Dwyer Brown was so open and welcoming, and was listening to him, and how meaningful that was to him. And then I told Dwyer Brown and got his response, cool, which I relayed back to John. And John's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know why, but that makes me feel so good right now, Yeah. And then it makes me feel so good. And so these little moments of back and forth, it feels like such a privilege to close the gap or close the circuit. I don't know how to say it in these relationships.
Yeah, it's his experience of doing something so simplistic, but it being so meaningful. It really draws to, like the kind of quietness of just playing catch, the pop of the mint, all that, but what that can draw from. And he shared a story about how a guy's like, hey, I want to come. Can I come and play catch with you? I'm coming from this place. It's a little far away. I'm going to drive up. And then the man comes and drives, comes and meets him at night, and is like, hey, do you mind if you wear this glove? And he brings out this little, pink glove or something. And I'm like, ugh, I feel my heart start to go, oh man, I think I see where this is coming. And then he says, yeah, this is this was my daughter's glove. She died. And I'm like, oh my God. Like right now, as I'm sharing it, I'm like, the beauty to be able to, just through catch, to be able to offer that to someone, this man that lost his child, and to be able to play catch with what represents his daughter again. Like, oh man. Yeah. Just amazing.
Yeah, and he has many stories like that are just so deep. And I had somebody recently. It was the head of vice principal of a high school, and he's like, we're gonna have a catch day in the spring. So just, if you have any ideas, we want to really honor these people, and so just wanted to check in. But it's really cool. It's like from John's initial simple, and he got it from somebody too, but he took it to that next level, right? And it's just building off of people, and now high school are having this, and it's spreading, and it's really amazing to see.
Yeah, it really is. It's incredible. Okay, where was that? Okay, I wanted to talk about Eddie Scissons Syndrome, and then get your perspective, maybe some psychoanalysis perspective. So, first, I guess, if you can give your best kind of DSM definition of Eddie syndrome, and
Not a big fan of the DSM.
yeah, me either. But yeah, give your best kind of, I guess, compact definition of what Eddie Scissons Syndrome is, and then tell me why it exists in your best kind of psychoanalysis perspective.
Do you want me to relate it back to the book?
I guess you can kind of within the book say who Eddie Scissons is, but then kind of explain.
This feels like a hard one because I tried to summarize it so many times and there's so many components. But so in Shoeless Joe, which became Field of Dreams, so in Shoeless Joe the novel, there's a character named Eddie Scissons, who's this old man in his 80s. Who claimed to play on a famous Chicago Cubs team in the 10s or 1912, something like that. And he was lying. He never played on this team. He played semi-pro ball, but never played in the big leagues. And then he was exposed. He felt terrible. But it turns out kind of well in the book. But then, in a turn, W.P. Kinsella, who made up this character, writes a short story a few years later about the Eddie Scissons Syndrome, right? And so in his short story, there's a scholar and a graduate student who go around interviewing people and to write this paper on Eddie Scissons Syndrome about baseball players or people who lie about being professional baseball players, right? And so this is the situation. Around the same time this is happening in real life, there's a graduate student and a professor who do actual research and talk to actual people, including the Hall of Fame, about this. So Eddie Scissons Syndrome is men who lie about playing professional baseball, whether that's in the major leagues or semi-pro ball. It's just they're lying about it. They found from the Baseball Hall of Fame, from researchers and historians and librarians there, that people would come in all the time to the Hall of Fame claiming to have been former baseball players, former major league players, and most commonly relatives of deceased men would come in and say, oh, my father said he played for this pro team or this professional team. Do you have archives? Do you have records? And 1 out of every 5 times that happened, it was a lie. I mean, that's amazing. I was just talking to somebody who was blown away by the statistic. 1 out of every 5 men who claimed to have played professional baseball were lying. And So that's what it is. Clinically, why is it happening? It's happening because, you look good when people think you are a professional baseball player. It makes you feel taller. It makes you feel more confident. And you have something to brag about. There's some kind of hollowness or insecurity inside you that you feel like you have to make up for by lying about that. And Rob Schenkoff, he said people were still doing that when it was possible to look it up on Google, within a few seconds. People were still lying about playing professional baseball, and the lengths to which they would go was incredible. So that's what it is.
Yeah. And so you think from a clinical standpoint, the reason for it is some deep inadequacy trying to be filled through the lie?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. They actually went to, he went and talked to this chiropractor he wore a World Series ring, and he admitted that he did it so he could get more customers. So it was purely financial. So that's another reason. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when you started talking about it in the episode, my mind immediately went to, I'm a combat veteran. That's not a lie. You could look it up, I suppose, but I don't know if you can look it up actually. I got an award back. I believe you. Yeah, that, I guess I got receipts, as the kids say. But yeah, what I have noticed being a combat veteran is there's a lot of combat veterans out there that are not combat veterans that might have been even in a combat place, might have been in Afghanistan, might have been in Iraq, but never saw any action whatsoever or never did anything. They were support staff essentially. So there's, infantry guys, and then there's support staff, there's combat related jobs, and then there's not, that help support the combat related jobs. Right. And so, yeah, I've recognized, a lot of people claim certain things, and you can almost see it right away from a combat perspective. You can almost see the insecurity oozing out as they're sharing the story. This came up to mind just now. There's a guy on YouTube a few years ago that would out all these guys that would claim to be ex-Navy SEALs. And again, like you said, now you can, this stuff is documented. You can look it up. And so they would go and confront these people. This old grizzled ex-Navy SEAL would go and confront these people and be like, hey, why are you claiming to be a SEAL? And they would just lie and find all the ways. Oh, this is how, the missions we did were so top secret that it wouldn't be, there. And they'd find all these sort of ways to kind of get around it. And other than the obvious of being like someone who is deeply insecure and doing something that would be for somebody who's actually been through the experience, doing something so shameful as saying that they also were in that experience for clout or for whatever sort of reason. It seems like the only reason would be because of their own deep shame, their own feeling of inadequacy with life. But yeah, I suppose maybe there are also financial reasons, you can land a job, if you have that on your resume or something.
Yeah, well, in this crazy story, and I just find it crazy, and it's my favorite kind of humorous episode of the season. I mean, it's so bizarre, like life imitating art, imitating life. But Rob Schenkoff and Dick Rappeau, they wrote an academic paper, and Rob goes around and he's presented at the Hall of Fame on this, and they talk about it extending. It's not just baseball, but they talk about it happening a lot in war. And they specifically bring up, it was a manager for the Toronto Blue Jays who lied about being in war, and he thought it would help motivate his players. And then Ronald Reagan like repeatedly lied about being in these different places in World War II, and he wasn't anywhere close. And so, again, why did they do that? I'm sure, like, from a place of wanting to belong could really be in there as well, right? It's like these people, there's such tight unity, you see it happening, and there's a brotherhood, right? There are these bonds, and you want to be part of that. So I could see that being a large role for different people.
Yeah, I just thought that was such another little kind of branch off of the connection to this movie, or to the book, which is so fascinating to me. But another one, so I just listened to the Tim Busfield interview, and I thought that was fascinating. Obviously being a fan of the movie, I knew who he was. I had always thought, like, the only reason, and Tim Busfield was the brother-in-law, or the brother of Ray Kinsella's wife, and I always thought Annie, and I always thought the reason why they picked them was because they looked alike. I always thought, like, they could be siblings in real life, like they could literally just be siblings. Like, that's the reason why they picked them, is they both happen to be people that could act well, but also you could portray them easily as siblings, which is rare in movies.
You're the first person to say that.
Really?
You're the first person to say that, because I interviewed the casting director, talked to other people, and it was really hard to cast Annie. And, like, you're the first person to say, well, these two people resemble each other. Like,
to me, that always seemed like the obvious thing. Like, they picked two people that could act well for the part, but also looked similar. But in listening to the show, it seemed like that wasn't anything they brought up whatsoever. So that's funny.
No.
Yeah. But what was interesting, how you connected, I had no idea Tim Busfield went on, and shame on me, because I've grown up and lived in Sacramento all my life up until I moved up here in the country,
You should feel
I should feel deep shame for not knowing that Tim Busfield is in the Sacramento Baseball Hall of Fame. That's terrible. And he pitched 9 years of relief ball. Was that it, out of the bullpen or something? 8 years or something like that?
I think it was mostly relief. Yeah. But it's incredible, because he was 35 when he started, and he was semi-pro, which I think, depending on who you talk to, counts as professional baseball. But you start at 35, and then you play for 9 years after Field of Dreams. Another bizarre term.
It's such a crazy thing. And now I want to have him as a guest on a podcast, so maybe I'll ask you and see if I can get a connection somehow, and a link to him. But that's amazing. So I guess I'll end with this. Let me do this. Let me kind of open up this last question with a quote, because I think this quote kind of helps explain why I'm asking the question. And this was the quote from Ray Liotta / Shoeless Joe in the movie. He says, "Man, I did love this game. I'd have played it for food money. It was the game, the sounds, the smells. Did you ever hold up a ball or a glove to your face?" And I can continue the quote, but I'm going to stop there, because the moment I heard him say that part, "Did you ever hold up a ball or a glove to your face?" I'm like a kid. I'm like, of course. Like, I know it. And though I'm not deep, like, I'm a kid watching it, so I'm connecting it to it from that version of myself, which is not the same version of myself today, who's somebody who's lost his father and all that sort of stuff, right? So, but the smell of the ball, the smell of the grass, the smell of the leather mitt that's, like, really worn in, the leather smells different than fresh leather, but it still has, like, this richness to it. And there's so much about it. The smell of the dirt, if it's kind of being dusted up from the wind. the smell of fresh cut grass. There's nothing like fresh cut grass. There's just nothing like it. But there's so much romance with baseball. And I don't know if other sports have this. Other sports have some nuance to romance. The boxing has an artistic romance to it, and you can see when you see movements and you see brilliance in the ring, you're like, wow, like it can draw you in terms of the artistry that's happening physically. And there's different things that can happen, but I don't think anything highlights from a romantic standpoint that can draw everyone in, but especially males in, to this deep romance and this historical romance that's associated with it. So I guess I wanted to ask you, could you explain why baseball is different in this way? Why is baseball so different to where we, like, as men, we can connect to it in this way that feels unsafe in any other way?
As you were talking, this comparison came up for me, the difference between romance and lust. And I see a lot of sports only in that lust category because there's not the time to develop a romance. And a romance seems more simmering, a slower burn. And baseball, of course, has that. And you think about movies, sports movies that have more of that nostalgia, that romance. And I think of baseball and I think of golf. And I'm not a golf fan. I play golf maybe once or twice, but it has that slowness to it. And I see the connection in those two versus football or versus basketball. I guess soccer in a way, but soccer's kind of slow, but also always moving, right? There's always motion. And in football and basketball, there's always motion. And in baseball, there's a lot of inaction. There's a lot of time to contemplate what's going on. So I think that's a big part. Not only playing the game and contemplating a lot of different things, but watching the game. You have time to contemplate, to really let your mind float in other directions, maybe connect with yourself. W.P. Kinsella pointed out the irregularities of the game in the baseball field and the dimensions, how the foul poles, kind of the foul lines stretch off into infinity. And it's this cosmic connection and allows for all of these possibilities that other sports don't have with their constraints. So all of those things come together to create this more irregular and idiosyncratic game that allows for more time and space. So there is this opportunity for the nostalgia and the romance to develop. That's what I think.
That is such a wonderful answer. That is such a wonderful answer. That's incredible. I don't know, like, the only thing that could have made that better just now, Ben, is if that was done in like Vin Scully's voice. That was like
What's Vin Scully's voice? Can you do
I
it?
cannot do it. I'm not even gonna. His voice is so it's majestic. It's clean and it's fluid, and the way he can mix in phrases so fluidly. Like I'm not even gonna pretend to try to do it. You got a Vin Scully impression?
No, I can't think of how I think of Howard Carey. Like he kind of talks like that, but Vin Scully, I can't think of it right now.
It's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's crisp, but like it's got the tenor, but it's like the inflection of how he does things. He could tell he had that magic quality where he could tell a whole story and be able to end it exactly on the third strike of the third out, or like exactly at the right time. He was just magical. Yeah, it was
perfect timing. Yeah, for me it was Phil Rizzuto because I always listened to the Yankees games growing up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
He was the voice.
So you a Yankees fan?
Yeah. Like I'm a Red Sox and Yankees fan.
Wait.
And
No,
I
what
know.
are you doing?
I know, right?
What are you doing?
So I grew up a Wade Boggs fan, so I love the Red Sox. And I lived in Pennsylvania where we would get the Yankees games on, I don't know what the network was. So, that's what I had to watch. And the Phillies, I guess, I never liked the Phillies. But I liked the Yankees, and they weren't really good in the early 90s, but they had good players like Bernie Williams, and I mean they got all the superstars too. Like Roger Clemens was playing for him, David Cohn, and a lot of really good players. Don Mattingly's probably done by then, nearing his end.
Yeah, 95 was
so they're just fun to watch.
95 was Mattingly's last year. The early 90s was like I was a Yankees fan growing up. Like I said, my dad was a Dodgers fan. I was a Yankees fan, which is weird being in Northern California. There's a story to it as to why, but Mattingly, Donnie Baseball was my guy before I was ever a Yankees fan. It was Don Mattingly, and then it became the Yankees as a result. And you didn't care that they were terrible in 89, 90, 91, 92. And then around 93, 94, there started to be the shift. It was like, okay, Mattingly's finally going to get into the playoffs. And then 95 happens, and Mattingly's dealing with all these back injuries. And then the kid broke my heart in 95. Griffey, by himself, essentially alone, destroyed what should have been Mattingly's first playoff appearance. That should have been the year. And then, he retires. And then Yankees get Tino Martinez from the Mariners, ironically. And then they get, Torrey takes them into the World Series, and then win the first World Series in so many years. And then it was off and running from 96 on. Yeah.
What was Mattingly? Because was he on the Dodgers recently when they won the World Series, or no? Because I know he was a manager hitting.
Yeah,
coach.
he didn't. He wasn't. Is it Marlins? I think maybe there. Marlins. Maybe it's where he's coaching. Or no, it might be Toronto Blue Jays actually.
Devil Rays.
Blue Jays, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
I could be wrong, but I think he's coaching on Blue Jays now. So yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would have words for me in terms of now, because I still like to watch the Yankees, but I like to follow like who's jumping out, and I like to follow the Dodgers. And I mentioned this in my first season, like this whole RBIs. It really matters who's hitting before you to get on base, and the Dodgers just have a phenomenal 1, 2, 3 setup. And so like I love following these developments and these teams that are doing things differently, and that's interesting to me. So do you enjoy watching the Dodgers now?
No, I can't stand the Dodgers. I'm a Yankees fan, but I think I respect it though. Like because right now everybody hates the Dodgers because they're buying up whatever they want.
Yeah.
And me being a Yankees fan, I can understand it. Like, why would you not?
Yeah. Right.
Why would you not? Like,
that's what they've been doing.
That's what gave them all the years of success that they've had, is because they bought stars. And so, and for me, though, I can understand like for the A's and teams like that can't put the money together, and it causes you to respect the management of Billy Beane or something like that, to be able to put together a winning season in spite of not having the money. It causes you a deep level of respect. So right now, being outpurchased by the Dodgers or by the Mets causes you to get angry in a way that maybe you can only reflect with it in a way that someone like the A's has been outpurchased. But at the same time, like, I can understand it. I'm like, if you have the money and you have the fan base and you have the clout over enough years to have that type of fan base is going to give you unlimited funds, then why not use the funds that you have? I love that about baseball. Like you said, the limitlessness of it, the potential of it, that there is no salary cap too. It goes within that. I think, to me, for a lot of people, maybe that feels unfair, but to me, that feels fair because if your fans support you, if you do right by your fans will support you. And no matter where the market is, it's not like the A's have a poor market. Bay Area is not a poor market. So even though they're leaving now, I think you treat your fans well and they're going to treat you back well, and it's going to show, and that can be a cycle that continues itself. But yeah.
Well, as long as you can make the argument, which you can, and it's probably unfortunate the way that the lack of a salary cap is going, but you can point out teams, and this happened with the Orioles recently and the Devil Rays. They had really small budgets and they did really well, right? So you don't need big budgets, and sometimes big budget teams don't do well. So you can continue to make that argument. I'm wondering from your perspective, if you've ever thought about this, but like from a therapist or psychologist perspective, I am curious about teams that have tried holistic approaches or everyone coming together to work on these mental health aspects. Like if they've really gone hardcore into those areas at times, and what has come from it, or if they haven't, and what would happen? Like, do you ever think about that?
Well, I know I'm not aware of many teams that's focused on the mental health side of things. I think if there probably was one earlier on, it'd probably be like a Joe Madden team or something. But so I'm not aware of any, but I know there are college teams right now that are doing things like there are professional teams that are focusing on nutrition, which does have a mental health massive component to it. So that's good. But I think there's college teams that are doing like no social media, they're limiting phone time, and those teams are seeing great success as a result. Significant jumps in statistics as a result by limiting social media, limiting phone time. There's recently a girls college volleyball team that started doing that. That started seeing a ton of success with it. So I think that's going to be a wave that's going to be accepted because you're going to see some of these lower teams that they're not the D1 schools, but they'll start seeing it within the D2, D3 schools, seeing success, and those coaches are going to want to implement the same thing. So, but there could be other teams doing it. It's just limited within my knowledge. I'm not aware of other teams doing it. Are you aware of any teams doing that?
No, I feel like it would take some research to find out, because I don't know, it wouldn't come out unless a team did really well or came from the bottom to the top, and then it would be covered. But otherwise, it probably wouldn't come out in the news.
Yeah, individually, there's the guys that get sports performance therapists and stuff, and then they have to do some type of deep work. Inevitably, they do deep work, but it'd be interesting. Are guys doing like the really deep work? That it's not performance oriented, but more oriented around trauma and stuff during a season. I don't know if that would even be a good thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Because you're opening things up. You want to start that in the off season.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I think we'll close with that, Ben. I mean, this has been a fun conversation.
All right.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Really fun. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links.
Little boy in a baseball hat stands in the field with his ball and bat, says, I am the greatest player of them all, puts his bat on his shoulder and he tosses up his ball, and the ball goes up and the ball comes down, swings his bat all the way around. The world's so still. falls to the ground. Now the little boy doesn't say a word, picks up his ball, he is undeterred. Says, I am the greatest there has ever been. And he grits his teeth and he tries it again. And the ball goes up and the ball comes down. He swings his bat all the way around. The world's so still you can hear the sound. The baseball falls to the ground. He makes no excuses, he shows no fears. He just closes his eyes and listens to the cheers. Little boy in a baseball hat picks up his ball, stares at his bat. Says, I am the greatest, the game is on the line. And he gives his all one last time. And the ball goes up like the moon so bright, swings his bat with all his might. And the world's so still can be. And the baseball falls, and that's strike three. Now it's supper time and his mama calls. Little boy starts home with his bat and ball. Says, I am the greatest, that is a fact. But even I didn't know I could pitch like that. He says, I am the greatest, that is understood. But even I didn't know I could pitch that good.